Okay, I wrote everything down so I would stay on track and not cry. So I'm going to try that. So I just want to read a few verses that have meant a lot to me this year and on the trip, and it's Psalm 139, verses 7 through 10. It says, "Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me." So I wanted to take a minute to kind of explain what we were doing. We were on a medical trip with Medical Missions Outreach. They've come to our church before, and what they do is they partner with a local church to provide free medical care as an outreach of that local church to give the opportunity for the gospel to be given. So the local church that we partnered with were with our missionaries, Josh and Julie Mead. Josh Mead was here at our missions conference in the spring, so you all would have met him then. And then the pastor of the church is Malik Job, and he is in one of the pictures. There's a picture of our North Life team, and then him, and he's wearing a North Life hat. So when you see that, you'll know that's him. So we were excited to represent North Life in Africa. We went to Senegal, West Africa, which is a country, it's on the west side of Africa underneath the Sahara Desert. So it's not like the jungle like you think of Africa. It's very dry, desert, sandy place. It is a free country, but they practice Islam, and the Islamic leaders kind of control the people. They also practice animism, so they kind of mix Islam with these like spirit worship type practices. And then it was a French colony at one point too, so there's also some like touches of French in there. So lots of people were carrying around baguettes. It's 1 mile away. Where we were at in Senegal is 1 mile away from Mauritania, which is the country above it. And from Mauritania upward, they practice Sharia law. So it's very Islamic. The governments are Islamic. They persecute Christians heavily in Mauritania. And some of the Christians that we worked with were from these areas. We were in a small fishing village that's part of the city of Saint Louis. Saint Louis has an old city, which is on an island, and a new city on the mainland, but both are impoverished in spiritually and darkness. The people practice Islam for the most part, and the call to prayer echoes over the city throughout the day and the night. So that's kind of the backdrop. Culturally, they practice polygamy. Children are often neglected. They incorporate spirit worship and superstition by doing things like wearing herbs, and they also will cut their infants and leave scars on their faces. The idea is like to ward off evil spirits. They also have a really sad practice that is based in Islam, where they send their boys into cities to live in the streets, and they beg in return for learning the Quran. So these boys live, we encountered a lot of them. It's a big practice in Saint Louis. So they basically live in gangs of children on the streets, and they rely on the people of the city to feed them and clothe them. They're required to beg for money that they bring back to the mosque. And the local imam, the Islamic leader, is sort of over them, but they're very neglected. They usually only get one meal, if that, and then they also just rely on the kindness of people to give them food and to take care of them, to do their laundry, that kind of thing. Mr. Josh explained to us that these kids and the others that actively practice Islam, they actually learn very little of the Quran, and that's actually an open door for Christians. So Mr. Josh said they often can use their lack of understanding of their own religion to open the door to talk to them about the gospel, which is pretty amazing. So what we did, we set up a medical clinic inside of a school building. So one of the pictures up there, you'll see a building with what looks like a desert in front of it. And that was our building. It had a little courtyard and that sand. is what we would cross back and forth. The way the clinic works is it is free, so we offer free medical care. There is a lab where we can do testing, we can do simple procedures, wound care, that kind of thing. We had physical therapy, which is super helpful because then we can teach them different ways to address their needs. And then a full pharmacy where we can dispense medicines. And then there's also an optical clinic. And if they go through the optical clinic, they get an eye exam and free prescription eyeglasses. So the area that we were in had never before, to the knowledge of our local leaders that were helping us, had never had any type of Christian outreach. And most people there had never met a Christian before or had any type of opportunity to hear about Christ. So in the clinic, I served as a provider, which was a privilege. So I was seeing patients, and then Timothy, Sadie, and Micah served as runners, and they ran across that desert that you'll see in the picture. It was very, very hot, and they worked very hard. Their role is one of the most important in the clinic because they control the flow of patients. So they help bring us patients, they bring patients to the lab, and then back to us after they get their testing. They help them get to the pharmacy. So they were the only 3 runners, so they were very busy, and they worked very hard this week. And then the need, one of the other things that we do in the clinic is provide a lot of education. So obviously, we are not going to be there for a long time. So since we're there for a short time, we provide as much medication as we can to address their needs, but we also do a lot of educating. So it's really easy in a situation like this to feel overwhelmed by the need because there's so many patients and their medical needs are so dire. But MMO leadership teaches us to take our time with each patient and just address each need. So we just look at the person in front of us and spend as much time as we need teaching and then addressing each of their needs that they have. We also work hand in hand with interpreters. So this time, we did have interpreters from the local church in San Luis, Pastor Malik's church. We also had a whole team that came in from a neighboring country, which was super cool. They came from the Gambia, and they worked with us as interpreters. Many of them speak 5 or more languages. The language barrier is big. They speak Wolof, but they also speak Creole and Pular and lots of other dialects. So without our interpreters, we couldn't have done anything. So we're so thankful for them. And some of the Christians that we worked with were Christians that had come from other countries and had been persecuted. We worked with people that had been beaten for their faith, that had been lost their families, lost their jobs, lost their homes. So that was a huge privilege to work with Christians and to see their faith and to see their joy. And then we often also pray over our patients as well, whenever the Lord leads us to do that, which is a privilege. And then one of my favorite parts is coaxing smiles out of them. Sometimes that's with little gifts, like we bring chapsticks. That was a big hit. They were calling Timothy the Senegalese Santa because he had lots of toys. So he was like handing toys out to everybody. And we also really enjoyed learning little bits of their language. That would also get lots of smiles if we, were trying to say things in their languages. So that was really fun. The medical need there is very, very great. And if I had more time, I would go more deeply into that. But the basic gist is they just have absolutely no medical access, no care at all. So even though there's some available in the country, we did our best to work with what was available and found the need just greatly lacking. So that was very humbling to know that the patients we were seeing had severe wounds, high blood pressures, high heart rates, so a lot of really sick people. And it was devastating to us as medical providers to see how sick they were and how little access they had to care. Their suffering, their medical suffering will definitely be something that echoes in our hearts and just drives us to pray for these people and for this ministry. So that's kind of an overview of what we were doing. Every patient that came through our clinic, they were receiving literature, receiving like a QR code that they could go online. A lot of people in this culture will not be open to gospel conversations at first, but they're willing to listen to something. So Pastor Malik kind of spearheaded that. They were also playing the Jesus film in some of the local languages. But each person got an opportunity to hear that, and then each person, many of them were prayed over multiple times because they would get prayed over at the provider desk and then in the lab and then at the pharmacy, and so they were getting a lot of prayer too. So some of my favorite parts, we definitely had some hardships. We had flight delays and sickness. It was 105, so it was very, very hot. And even we ran into, at the end of the week, we even ran into some political oppression, I guess I'll call it that, and had to close our clinic early the last day. So that was really sad. But even though we experienced all of these hardships, God overcame those. And that was really powerful to see him answering prayers and giving us the strength and the wisdom that we needed. Another favorite part was lifting our voices from many nations. Our team was a team of 43, and we are from the United States and Canada. But then we also had our interpreters from the Gambia, and then we had our brothers and sisters from San Luis. And we were able to come together, lift our voices, and worship Jesus in a place where he had not been named. And that was one of the most impactful things I've ever experienced. It's such a privilege to be able to be a part of that. So I guess if I could say something about that, would be if God can empower us to do it, a middle-aged mom who brought 3 young people, he can help you to do it too. I'm so thankful that he uses broken and imperfect people. In the MMO journal, they give us a journal of devotions. One of the devotions reminded me to doubt my doubts, not what I know to be true about God and his purposes. So I also want to encourage you that if you're struggling in your faith or you're having a hard time working some things out spiritually, just get closer to where the gospel is out, and that will get so much more clear. So if you have the opportunity to go on a missions trip or just help out in VBS or help at one of the homeless meals or all these opportunities where you're close to the gospel, that's going to clear up any doubts that you're having in your mind or any struggles that you're having with your faith. And then my other favorite part was watching our amazing North Life kids. They served tirelessly. They never complained. They had big smiles. We ended up delayed for several days, which is a whole nother story, but if you want to hear it, you can ask. Our flights, we did not get on our flight to Africa. So we were stuck in New York City for a while, and they never stopped smiling. We decided that God had a purpose for that, so we left a trail of the gospel behind us. We were handing out tracts and giving out cards and talking to people wherever we could because we knew that God had a purpose for that. And then they even encouraged adults. There were adults on our trips that were on this trip that were having a hard time because of the heat and the illness and just different things. And they were just always with a positive attitude, looking out for others, finding ways they could serve. So I was super, super proud of them. And it's no surprise because they're North Life kids. And then the last thing I want to say is Jerejef, which is Wolof for thank you, or in French should be merci beaucoup. So thank you so much for praying for us. This is a trip where we desperately needed your prayers. The desperation for the gospel, how much these people need it, kind of matched how hard things were. And so we desperately needed your prayers. And we couldn't have done what we did. We couldn't have done anything without your prayer and your loving support. We knew you were praying for us, and we appreciate that so much. And this MMO trip is a little bit different because there's not a measurable outcome. It won't be something that we'll know till we get to heaven. But I know that when we do and we hear what God has done and how he worked and he used this and he's using the Mead family, those people that are in heaven for that reason will also be thankful for all of you for giving and for praying for us. So I appreciate you very much. I think Sadie's next.
Okay. Especially compared to Miss Brandy, I am woefully unprepared, so I apologize in advance. But I just wanted to start off and just thank each and every single one of you for your prayers, for your donations, for just coming up and saying hey, how are you doing with the missions trip? Are you excited? How are you feeling? That means so much. And like Miss Brandy said, we needed those prayers. We might not have gotten to Senegal or gotten back if it wasn't for all of you guys. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I know I speak for everybody on the team. First off, I don't know if everybody knows this, but I went on the trip last year with Miss Brandy, and I was so excited to get to go back with her. She is just such a godly example, and like she was saying, with all of the travel issues and everything else, she was such an example to me and an encouragement to me and Micah and everybody else. Just an example of what a godly leader is. Even when she had older people with her, she was still leading our group, leading the troops into action and bolstering us and helping us just have a good attitude and the goofy North Life smile. And she's just such an encouragement. And Micah literally had the biggest smile the entire trip. He got sick the one day, and literally the leader of the camp asked him, okay, how are you doing? You're running out in the sun, you're hot, you're sweating, drenched, everywhere, drenched in sweat. And he's like, I'm good. Big goofy smile, and 30 seconds later throws up. And but you wouldn't have known. Sorry, Micah. You wouldn't have known, though. He had such a good attitude and was genuinely such encouragement to everybody. And same goes for Timothy. He's only 12 years old, and he's out there in 105-degree heat and being an encouragement to the older folks who maybe weren't having as good as an attitude as he was. He was just had a big smile and was helping everybody and was the Senegalese Santa. I wasn't really sure what to talk about on this trip, but I just thought I would talk about the differences that I noticed compared to the last trip. So physically, we were in a different location, obviously. Last time we were at the Meads apartment, and we were also in a building across from their apartment, so we were kind of more local, but this one was at the schoolhouse, so we were a little bit more official. We had a little bit more room and stuff. Another difference was the heat. Last year was not as bad, I don't remember, but this year was really hard. It wasn't just hot, it was humid. So the instant you step out, you're immediately kind of drenched in sweat, and you're just working, and you're running out in the sun. So that was really hard, and that got a lot of people, but thank the Lord, no one was really seriously hurt, and even people who had to go home for a couple days and just rest and take a minute, they were able to come back a couple days later and still serve. And the entire MMO team, all 42 of us who were there, they had such good attitudes and were just serving and focused on the people. And it's really encouraging, and it does help that the people are just so sweet and grateful. Obviously, with anywhere, there's gonna be some problems, but these people are waiting. Some of them were waiting for, since yesterday. They were waiting since the day before, and they've been waiting for hours in the hot sun with it pouring on them, and they don't dress like Americans, so they have, especially the women, have a lot of layers, so that's beautiful clothing, but very, very hot. So they're standing out in the sun with probably their kids or their grandma or their mom, who they just want to see to get medical attention for very serious medical issues. But they just have such a sweet attitude. They come in, they're smiling. You cannot understand a word they're saying, but you're like, hi, or ça va, and asking them how they are, and they'll answer you with a big smile. And I had multiple conversations with people where we would just try to communicate with what little English they knew and what little Wolof I knew, and we would just end up laughing. But just the connection that you can have with them and just their attitude, even though they have so little, they just love so much, and they're just so grateful for everything that MMO was doing. It's just very humbling and very inspiring. Other than the physical differences that I noticed, there were a lot of mental differences, at least for me personally. I know leading up to the trip, a couple months or weeks before, there were just several problems, both with the Mead families, but with our group as well from North Life. Miss Brandy had some medical stuff leading up to it. I was struggling a lot mentally, just every night, just having to cry out to the Lord and be, what is going on? But I think the devil was just trying to throw anything he could at us and use whatever he could find to just throw at us to try to discourage us. But the Lord obviously ultimately is going to prevail. And like Miss Brandy said, this isn't a trip that we can come back and say we saw 100 people saved. I don't think we can even say we saw one person saved. But we can say that we planted the seeds and that Josh Mead and his family are going to continue to water those seeds, and Pastor Malik is going to continue to water that, and the people are going to continue to grow and continue to learn about Jesus, which is super encouraging. This trip was a lot for me. I think I got a lot of direction from the Lord that I had been praying for before I went. But this trip was harder for me. Last year, I just remember it was so easy to just get into the flow, just serve, do all the things. I was in optical last year, get people their glasses, do all that, and not worry so much about anything else. This trip, I don't know what it was, but just it was harder to get outside of my head and to really be present and in the moment and not worry about all of these external things, which in turn forced me to pray more, which is obviously a good thing, but it was hard just having to pray and ask God, Lord, please let me focus on the people that you have me with right now. Help me to love them like you love them. Help me to see them like you see them. So that was a challenge, but it's ultimately good. So there was just a lot of spiritual warfare and a lot of technical issues and stuff that the Lord ultimately worked out, but was definitely harder. Some of my favorite things was the food. Miss Julie Mead, she made all of our meals. So she made over 40 meals each and every single day for all of us, and it's hot. I went in her kitchen the one day, and it was really, really hot. So she worked tirelessly for a couple hours every single day, making us food and bringing it to us. And she also has a Senegalese friend who made some Senegalese food, and we were allowed to eat that. So I would always grab some of that and eat that, which was really fun. They eat a lot of rice and fish, which is pretty delicious. Another one of my favorite things was every morning, I think Miss Brandy kind of touched on this, they would have worship up on the optical roof. So a couple of the interpreters who have gorgeous voices and they just worship so fully and loud, and it's so beautiful, would start us off with a couple just worship songs. And even if we didn't completely understand or know the songs that they were singing, we were just able to just sing to our one Lord and Savior. Even if we didn't fully connect, we were able to connect through that. And it was just a really, really cool experience to be able to just stand there and just worship God with people from a totally different continent. Some things that I learned. I really like how the Lord just lets you connect. I saw so many connections just with Micah helping some of the old ladies like get down off the step and get to the next place, or Timothy handing out suckers to the little kids and just giving all the gifts away to everybody, and Miss Brandy making so many connections with each patient that she had. It's just amazing, because even if we didn't have an interpreter at the time, you're still able to connect to those people and show the love of Jesus to them, even if you can't give them the gospel presentation because, one, you don't speak the language, and two, they wouldn't receive it. They can see that there's something different, that you love them, and that you have the love of Jesus for them. And that's just, it's very, very cool. I had the opportunity this trip to get to be with the Mead family more than I did last year. Clarissa, the little girl, I think she's 11. We got to have a sleepover at her house, which was super fun. And it's just so cool to see how much they sacrifice. And it's very humbling and kind of like, okay, I need to check myself. Because the stuff that they have to go through or just work with every single day, just with the heat alone, is hard. But then with the technical difficulties that they have, or Julie homeschools their kids, so she's with them every single day and doesn't really have an outlet anywhere else. So just the loneliness that would be there, the kids were just so excited to get to talk to everybody and to get to play with. We played hide and seek like every night in the hotel. Like just the heart that they have for the people, that is so clear, and that if they didn't have it for those people and they didn't have the heart for their Lord, they wouldn't be there. And it's just very inspiring to me to kind of check myself and be like, okay, I can be doing more for the Lord. I can sacrifice more. This is not that big of a deal. I can be giving more to him. I'm just very grateful to have gotten to go on this trip, and especially with Miss Brandy, Mike, and Timothy. Like I said, they're the ideal mission trip team. If you're going to go on a mission trip, go with them. It's amazing. They will bolster your spirits. Even if they're loopy, slap happy, me and Timothy had a couple of slap happy moments. Like, it's an amazing experience. And I'm just really grateful that I got to go. So thank you to everybody again for all your prayers. We really appreciate it.
As you guys probably know, my name is Senegalese Santa Claus. So first I wanted to start off by thanking everybody that just contributed to the trip by praying or donating and just being there for me when I needed a little bit of comforting. Just thank you so much for that. And I wouldn't have been able to go without you. To start off, I wanted to tell you guys my favorite part of the trip, and that was being able to spend time with godly people. I was so happy to be able to go on this trip with people I know and love spending time with. Africa was a great experience for me. It taught me a lot. One thing it taught me was how much we take for granted. The people in Africa have nothing. No clean water, no air conditioning, and most of them don't even have enough food to feed their family. They have no good access to health care, and not a single person had ever heard the name of Jesus in the entire village. And that is a very sad thing. Luckily, that's what MMO came to fix. It was such a great lesson to me, and what an opportunity that it was to be able to tell people about God and His Word. And not only that, but we also had the ability and honor of being able to serve the people of Senegal medically. Every patient got vitamins and much more. We were able to give out hundreds of pairs of glasses and were able to reach around 1,600 people. There were many trials along the way, missed flights, sickness, but God got us through it all. Satan didn't want us to go on the trip, but God did. It was an amazing experience that I'll never forget, and I would 100% do it again. God's amazing, and He can use us in many ways that we couldn't imagine. But if we're willing, He can use us in amazing ways.
So to start off, I guess I'll say how I heard about the trip. Miss Brandy just approached me one Sunday, maybe about 3/4 of a year ago. Just said, hey, I'm going back to Senegal. Do you want to go with me? And I said, sure. So then I went to my mom and I said, hey, Mom, can I go to Africa? And she said, okay. And then when I got home, Dad walked in the door and I said, Dad, Miss Brandy just invited me to go to Senegal. Can I go? And he said, sure. And he went down and sat on the couch and watched football. So they said yes, and I held them to their word. But going into this trip, I heard a lot about MMO, and I heard about like how smooth their trips go, how organized it all is. So I was kind of expecting that, but when I got there, it was not that. So almost right away, we began experiencing hardships from delayed flights, missing another flight, canceled tickets, hotel problems, bad drivers in New York, and more. Our trip did not start out as planned, but looking back, I would not change any of those experiences or anything that went wrong over this trip. Even with everything that went wrong, we could see the Lord working in ways I thought I would never get to experience. While we were stuck at the airports, as already said, we were able to leave a trail of gospel tracts with agents we worked with, conversations, all that, Uber drivers. And we were able to walk through security twice when we shouldn't have been allowed to, which was only something you get to read about in missionary stories, it seems like. So that was really cool to see God work in such a tangible way. At one point, we went to fix luggage problems, and so we went to the desk, and we were met by a receptionist who was from San Luis, Senegal, and she was able to get the manager to fix all of our problems. So that was a divine appointment. That was awesome to experience. So as already said, at the clinic, I was a runner, so yeah, they already explained my role, just taking people from place to place. And I was astounded with the level of poverty I saw. It was crazy to me that people there did not understand simple things like the importance of eating healthy or even drinking water. Many patients did not understand how to take pills or medication, stuff that we as Americans know as a second nature. Just, oh, I have a headache, let me pop some ibuprofen or something like that. They didn't understand any of that. And then, as Miss Brandy was saying, even with their culture being so deeply rooted in Islam and tribal practices, it was a very dark place. In the middle of clinic, we could hear the call to prayer, and I saw some patients just very slowly stand up, then very slowly bow down, put their face in the sand, stand back up, back down. Just how stuck they were and all that without God. Let's see, keep losing my place. With how close off the people were to the gospel, it's no wonder all the hard things we faced happened. It was the most tangible spiritual warfare I've ever experienced. But with everything that went wrong, God always seemed to trump what Satan did. Even though I was sick and had to stay in the hotel a couple of days, I was initially mad and angry about that. But I could see God work in and through that, as I was able to pray for the clinic specifically. Since I was there, I knew how I could pray for it. Then also, I had a chance to prepare to serve in the following days. As Miss Brandy said, we had to close the clinic the final day because of some corrupt politicians who took control of who came into the clinic. They were only allowing the rich and well-off in the area to come in, even though the poor had to wait hours in line. So the poor ended up kind of rushing the clinic and then just kind of stood there. So we started to kind of regain order, but as we did, we found out all that was going on with the politician and stuff. So we were all really angry about this, but as the situation continued to develop, we were at peace with closing the clinic, because in doing so, we showcased that we're Christians representing Jesus, and that we're not affiliated with the cultural and norms of that day, or over there. But we're here to help the poor and needy and show them God's love, just as Christ did in his ministry. So our prayer is that by closing the clinic, that would show the gospel, maybe even more than the medical. By going on this trip, I learned to trust God even when things aren't going our way. Even though in the moment it seems like everything is going wrong, when we came out of the situation, we saw God's hand through everything that happened. One of my favorite parts was the church service that Miss Brandy talked about, all the different languages when they were preaching. The pastor would say something, and then we had two translators at the same time saying it in two different languages. And then, I really enjoyed watching the church in San Luis serve those around them. One of the most convicting things was watching one of the lame men who was in a wheelchair. He showed up every day to clinic to help keep everything running smoothly. The clinic courtyard, as you already saw, was all sand, and all the roads were sand too. So to navigate that, you'd have to balance on the back two wheels. And he came every single day. And seeing his dedication to the gospel in church was extremely convicting. And coming back to the States, I see all the times that I make lame excuses of why I can miss church or not come to certain events just because I have a runny nose or too much homework. Also watching the Meads serve was also extremely encouraging. Just watching them go through those hardships every day with the faith and joy they had despite all of it. Just want to end with thank you for everyone who supported us both financially and especially by praying for us. As Sadie said, we either would have never made it to Senegal or we would still be stuck in there without your guys' prayers for us. Thank you to my parents for allowing me to go. And thank you, Miss Brandy, for just being a great example during the entire trip of what a true Christ follower is, for helping us navigate airports, helping me while I was sick, and being a huge encouragement to me throughout the entire thing.